Official timepiece.
Are you there? Okay, now it's better. All right, it's time to get started. First thing is the approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Anybody got any complaints? Beg your pardon? Motion to approve. Anybody else? Approval of the minutes from last meeting. Any problems with them?
Move to approve.
Second.
Second. All right. They're approved. Thank you. Yeah, okay. That's going to make some announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, everybody. It's good to see everybody here. Looks like we got a full house, which is good. Couple announcements tonight. We're having a lot of staffing changes right now. We've been short a couple of planners, scientists since July, and I'm happy to say that we have filled them both. One of this young lady over here, Catherine Wilhelm, will be our new Summers, if you knew Summer Smart, so she'll be taking Summer's place. Her first day in this new position is today, but, so behave. It's not her first day at VMRC, though. She's been here for about a year and a half as in the mandatory reporting program as a data analyst, and she has a master's degree from Southern Miss, and I won't tell what topic it was in. We have another person that will be starting on the 25th, and that will get Shanna's fisheries management group that she has back up to speed. We've been down two of our three planners have been gone for 6 months, and Alexa and Shanna and the rest of our staff have been filling in that void, and it's been trying at times, trying to get all that work done, because they do most of the work in our group. They sit on all the TCs, they organize these meetings, and do a lot of the work, so I appreciate the efforts they put in, and thank you for being patient with us this time. On another note, Jeff, our chairman, Jeff Deem, is going to be stepping down as chairman after this meeting today. It's his last meeting, and I want to thank him for all the work he's put in. He's not only been chairman for this committee for
12 years.
12 years he's been chairman, wow. But he's also been involved with the offshore wind energy projects, sending out notices to everybody. I actually went out with Jeff on his boat and looked at the first 2 turbines we put in. And I remember when I was in Georgia looking behind me, and there was this gray-haired man always talking to Rob O'Reilly, and it was Jeff Deem, and I got to know him after I came here. So he's been involved with the fisheries efforts for a long time. And Jeff, we thank you, and we're very proud of the work you've done, and we're appreciative of it. So thank you very much. With that said, Mr. Chairman, we would like to take nominations for vice chair and chairman. So if anybody on the board has any nominations.
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Ernie Bowden as chair and Will Branson as vice chair of FMAC effective after today's meeting.
You would need a motion. That's a motion. We need a second to that.
I second that.
Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, that's how we do it at ASMC. We do this quick so that we don't get this done. So, Mr. Chairman, it's up to you.
Motion accepted.
Okay. Thank you, Ernie, and thank you, Will. And we'll be getting with you soon and talking with you. Thank you for stepping up. I believe that's all I have at this time. Now we're going to move into the items. The first item we have is we have a new committee meeting policy that Alexa will be bringing up to you. It's pretty straightforward. It makes things a little bit more flexible for virtual meetings and things like that. So I'll give the floor to Alexa at this time. Thank you.
Thank you all. So all of you who are here in 2020 might remember we set some bylaws for the committee, which includes attendance, what constitutes a quorum, how many meetings, how many members, things like that. There's recently updates to Virginia's Freedom of Information Act regarding public meetings. So the Freedom of Information Act is what sets the rules for public meetings, how they're to be advertised to make sure they are accessible to the public and the public can participate. For example, advertisement notices are required. One thing pointed out in the FOIA training we received is that 3 or more committee members discussing committee business does constitute a meeting and therefore has to be advertised. So, for example, if 3 people are in a car coming down from the Northern Neck together, they can't technically discuss committee business because we haven't advertised to the public, hey, the meeting is in so-and-so's car. And then, as I said, as Pat introduced, there's some new rules for virtual meetings and for meetings with virtual participation. So on the committee, sometimes when, outside of COVID, sometimes we've had a meeting where we only have 1 or 2 topics, a meeting not worth people driving 3 hours to attend. We've said, let's have an all virtual meeting. We have the rules for that. And then occasionally, if someone couldn't make it in person, we made arrangements for them to be able to call in. That's something else that this policy dictates. But part of it is the committee must approve a policy for these situations before we can put it into action. So, for example, John Bello wanted to let it know he's not here because of health issues. He did really want to make it. I think he's probably listening online. But unfortunately, without this policy in place, we couldn't have him call in. So you all received a copy of the bylaws with the amendments all underlined. One thing added into the previous bylaw, a previous section of the bylaws, is what constitutes a quorum. A quorum is at least 51% of the committee members. And now we're saying that people will only count towards a quorum if they are physically present, so not calling in, unless they're prevented from attending by a disability or by being caretaker to someone with a disability. We'll get into some of the other reasons one can participate virtually, such as if they live more than 60 miles from the meeting location. That allows you to call in, but you will not count towards the quorum. So this is the start to the new Article 6, the meeting policies. Individual members of the committee may use remote participation instead of attending a public meeting in person if, in advance of the public meeting, the member notifies the chair and designated staff that the member has a temporary or permanent disability or other medical condition that prevents their physical attendance. A medical condition of a member of the member's family requires the member of the committee to provide care that prevents the member's physical attendance. The member's principal residence is more than 60 miles from the meeting location identified in the required notice. And a little more flexibly, the member is unable to attend the meeting due to a personal matter and identifies with specificity the nature of the personal matter. However, the person may not use remote participation due to personal matters more than 2 meetings per calendar year or 50% of the meetings. So if you're out of town or can't make it in person for some other reason, not in items 1, 2, or 3, let staff know. We'll have to identify it in the minutes, but that can be approved. For the all virtual meetings, the committee may convene a maximum of 2 all virtual public meetings per calendar year, or up to 50% of the meetings held per calendar year, rounded up to the next whole number. So if we've had 3 meetings in a year, only 1 of those could be virtual. However, all virtual meetings cannot be held consecutively with another all virtual meeting. All virtual public meetings must meet the following conditions. And I should state that everything added to these bylaws can be found in the Code of Virginia, section 2.2-3708.3. So it must meet the following conditions. An indication of whether the meeting will be in person or all virtual is included in the required meeting notice. That'll be the agenda and the notice we put on our website. And we have in person, for example, in the front lobby. Public access to all virtual meetings will be provided via electronic communication. Phone number of the chair or designated staff will be provided at the start of each meeting to alert the committee if the audio or video transmission fails. And we have had that in the past for our all virtual meetings. I think usually we've given Summer's number out. It'll be someone else, just a number. If you disconnect, if the meeting stops working, please let us know. And no more than 2 members of the committee can be together in one remote location unless that remote location is open to the public to physically access it. Again, because that constitutes a physical meeting. So we do need the committee to approve these amendments to the bylaws if we do want to hold all virtual meetings or allow virtual participation by members.
By adopting this, we're limiting ourselves to 2 virtual meetings, so there's no way to, I'm a fan of virtual meetings. So by doing this, we limit ourselves. Is it worth a discussion to, could we ever move towards all virtual meetings, or is that not?
It's in the code.
We wouldn't,
Good, okay.
Yeah,
So
we
I
wouldn't
saw where
be-
2/3 could change it, but that's not, okay.
it's whichever is greater. So in 2019, we were meeting practically once a month because of striped bass. So if we were having 6 meetings in a year, we could potentially have 3 virtual meetings. I'm not sure we would do
I
that for
just didn't know
something
if we could
pricier,
have a
but
discussion, because I saw where it said if 2/3 of the committee agree on changing the rules, we could change the rules, but that's not, if that's in code, that can't, that particular,
yeah, not having all virtual meetings is in code.
and that's Virginia code.
Yeah, and there is a separate code that applies to states of emergency. For example, if COVID happens again, please no. They'll be able to make accommodations for that.
Because with ASMSC meetings, you know, they're all, I was on a committee for 10 years, and every single one is virtual, so I didn't know if that was something we could move towards, but obviously not if it's in Virginia code, so thank you.
Any other questions from the committee?
Yeah, I have one, Jeff.
Okay,
Is, in some sections, you quote the Virginia law, and then is all this Virginia law or just portions of, I'm just curious, or just portions?
All of this is Virginia law. If not verbatim, then paraphrasing.
We still in a discussion mode?
Yeah?
Okay. Yeah, I just think it's interesting, and Mike, you might want to listen to this, it goes with your question. I've been to 2 significant meetings in the city of Virginia Beach. One was the Wetlands Board and one was the Bayfront Advisory Committee. And they had the same presentation from city attorneys on the same subject matter. So it's making the rounds.
Yeah, this isn't VMRC, this is statewide. We had training for all staff on Freedom of Information Act as it applies to public meetings. All the staff who run these meetings were required to attend. And it wasn't just us, it was applying to wetlands boards, school boards, anything that falls under the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Including the commissioners as well.
Jeff, I'm on PRFC's Finfish and Oyster committees. I'm gonna share this with PRFC staff,
Okay.
because we don't even come close to this.
I don't know how this would apply as not being directly an agency of the Commonwealth.
Yeah, they're not a state agency.
That's correct. It's a third party, it's a third agency.
Compact between
Okay,
Virginia
thanks.
and Maryland. So they'd have to do it independently.
That's correct.
anybody else? Any questions from the audience about this policy? Okay. We know we have a vote then. All in favor of it, raise the right hand.
All right, we will amend the bylaws and we'll send you all out a final version.
Thank you very much. That was unanimous, I take it?
Yes, that was unanimous. All right, I'm gonna pass it on to Straight Bass with Brooke.
Let's roll.
Look at that, right on time, perfect. Keep it moving along.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Brooke Lohman. I am our stock assessment scientist here. I'm usually sitting somewhere in the back crunching numbers. I don't address you directly all that often, so just figured I'd start off by introducing myself. I just want to give you an update on the striped bass stock status. We've recently completed update to the striped bass stock assessment. These two figures that you're seeing here are the very standard population, biomass, and fishing mortality reference points. The top you're seeing is for biomass. That's the female spawning stock biomass. The red line is the threshold level biological reference point, and the dashed line is the target. So as you're seeing, the population is still below the threshold level, which is what we define as being overfished. So the abundance is too low as of the 2013 stock. Below that is the fishing mortality, so the rate of fishing. So you're seeing there, the level is above the target amount of fishing and below the threshold. So in this case, fishing mortality is not beyond its threshold, so overfishing is not occurring. However, we are in a rebuilding plan, as I'm sure you're aware. And the final note on this slide is regarding recruitment. So recruitment has been below average for 6 out of the last 7 years. The slide, or the figure that you're seeing here, is the recruitment as measured of age 1 fish. So what you're seeing in the red arrow is the 2018 year class. If you're squinting and saying, Brooke, that looks like that's 2019, you're right, but remember that they're age 1s. So we are referring to those as the 2018 year class. That's going to come back in a couple of slides. We're talking about how that age class is moving through the population. But what's really important to note after that is that there are no additional strong year classes following it. So just to give you a little bit of information about what is some of the decision points made with the stock assessment, because as you know, there's lots of points of uncertainty. There always are. There are especially more when our management regimes change frequently and different things are happening in the population that we are having a hard time predicting. So for 2024 removals, we are of course not done with the year 2024 yet. So we have to make an assumption or a decision about what we think is happening with the removals in 2024. Through each of these bullet points that I'm going through, I have the what the assessment committee deems the sort of most plausible or most likely assumption for each of these is in bold and underlined. So we think that the removals are lower than we initially thought back in 2022, what we thought the removals would be. For 2025, we have to anticipate how removals are subject to change. Traditionally, in stock assessment modeling, you would assume all else being equal, next year will be similar to this year. But as I mentioned with that 2018 year class, those fish are moving into the size that is the most prevalent within the slot limit for the recreational fishery. So most of those 7-year-old fish will be right smack dab in the middle of your slot limit. So all else being equal, we would expect those removals to be higher next year if nothing else changes. And then finally, for 2026, again, traditionally we would assume, just in order to make a projection going forward, we would say next year's removals are similar to this year's, and the one after that is similar to next year. What we think will happen, however, is that all else being equal, removals in 2026 should decrease relative to 25, because again, that same year class of 7-year-old fish will then be 8 years old. They're going to be larger and mostly moving out of that slot limit. So what does any of that mean to you today? Nothing really, just yet. looking at the ASMFC Management Board, the board did agree with the technical committee's opinion on the most likely scenario. So again, that low 2024 removals, an increase next year, followed by a decrease in the following year. The board tasked the TC to develop some options to achieve a 50% probability of rebuilding by 2029, and that's a requirement by the Magnuson-Stevenson's Act. Whenever we have a depleted population in a rebuilding plan, we have to get to a 50% probability of rebuilding by X year. So the potential measures that they'll look at, they could consider shortening the 2025 recreational seasons, they could change the size limits, or they could consider reducing the 2025 commercial quotas. So the board decided to meet in December of this year. They're going to consider a board action to revise the 2025 recreational seasons or size limits and 2025 commercial quotas to achieve a 50% probability of rebuilding by 2029. So what is a board action? This is a brand new process, and it is not at all surprising if folks are unfamiliar with this or a little bit confused by this, so we're going to try to walk through a little bit slowly. At the last major management change, Amendment 7, Addendum 2, a new section was approved whereby if an upcoming stock assessment prior to the rebuilding deadline, which, as I mentioned, is currently 2029, indicates that the stock is not projected to rebuild by 2029 with a probability greater than or equal to 50%, and that is where we are sitting right now, the board can respond via board action where the board could change management measures by voting to pass a motion at a board meeting instead of developing an addendum or amendment, and that is different from the emergency action process. That is a lot of words to tell you essentially. Usually when things are happening with ASMFC, there's a fairly long, fairly transparent, open process for public input and lots of back and forth with public hearings. Because this stock is in a rebuilding plan and not projected to achieve it, this board is able to move forward without that public, without the same public process that it usually does. So the timeline, and here's where you guys can have a say in things and get some more information. So November 13th, the ASMFC Technical Committee will be meeting. So we'll be meeting to go through some of our board tasks and come up with those options, look through the calculations and see what some of the potential ways to reach different levels of reductions would be. December 5th, there will be a public information webinar. That'll be held by the ASMFC staff. December 9th, there will be an advisory panel meeting, followed by the 10th is your deadline for written public comments. So those are being accepted via email. Again, directly to the ASMFC. Unfortunately, we're in a place with this particular process that we can't, we can take public comments, but they're not really, we are not your outlet for this right now because this is a ASMFC board process that we, this commission doesn't vote on that. All right, so then January 16th, commercial season opens as usual. And then early winter of next year, we'll update our regulations to match ASMFC. So just for all of your information on the public information webinar, it's going to be December 5th, 6 p.m. You can register online. You'll receive a link to the meeting. If you have a fancy phone and scan your QR code, you'll go directly to the meeting registration. And then your deadline, again, for written public comments, December 10th, 11:59 p.m. You have a special email address for those public comments. And if you just include striped bass in the subject line, that'll help them keep everything organized. So I can do my best to answer any sort of procedural questions that you have.
Okay, go ahead.
Brooke, I have a question. Is this going to be up on the VMRC webpage?
Absolutely. We'll post this.
Jeff?
Okay, Mike?
The 2018 class, what's their average weight?
Their average weight.
Because on the commercial side, we don't, we don't say how many inches are the fish you catch, and we go by weight. We
Sure.
actually will put a specific gill net mesh out
Mm-hmm.
if we know a certain size fish is in that area. So what weight are those fish, average?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't know, but I can work backwards and calculate it for you in the next.
Josh has a guess.
What do you got?
8 to 12 pounds would be something that
Pardon me?
I would, 8 to 12 pounds fishing, in that slot. 20 to 31 inches.
Okay.
18-year class, 8 to 12.
As a reminder, that consideration for gear changes is not currently on the table. The only thing that is on the table for commercial changes is a drop in the quota.
Any questions from this end? Yeah, I've got a question, if I may. It's the stock size that we're shooting for still what it was after the moratorium, plus 25%, or what's the percentage?
Yes, 125% of what, 1994?
Does that seem strange to you? We don't fish for 5 years and we're gonna build it up 25% more than that, and that's our stock size?
It's a question that comes up a lot. And I think, on my end, as the scientist, as the person running your numbers, that's a management decision, deciding what, I know it sounds like I'm just trying to get around your question, and that's not the case, but that truly is a management decision. We will come to you and say, not to you specifically, we will come to the managers and say, what is, how do you want to decide what your threshold is? And that's what has been chosen, and that's what we base the calculations on, is achieving that number. There are certainly other ways to do it. Know what the process would be for Pat.
We went through it already, actually.
There was a, let me come up real quick. Was it addendum 1?
I don't remember, but
Yeah.
we went through.
Yeah, we went through it.
the
We had,
amendment one.
we had, with amendment, the most recent amendment we had, we went through this and we had all the topics, and it was a work group. And there were several work groups that got together and they had public comment. I sat on that as a board member, and they discussed a series of things, and one of the items was, adjusting that number. And that work group did not put that as a high priority at the time. So I think there were like 15 or 18 items that were considered for the amendment, and they knew they couldn't do all of them, so they whittled it down to, I think, 5 or 6 of them, and it didn't make the cut. And so it was considered, but at the time, the thought at the time was that they didn't want to do that. They didn't want to adjust it.
If it was adjusted downward, what would the situation be right now?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I think it's, there are some folks that feel that, you're kind of lowering the standard. And so in the middle of a process, so,
I think they didn't want to do it then,
they didn't want to do it then.
because
Yeah.
we were in the middle of
Yeah.
knowing that we needed to rebuild.
And it would require at least an addendum, if not an amendment, to probably do that.
I think
Yeah.
process.
I don't mean this against you all, but evidently this is all the information they've shared with you all, so there's really no information, basically.
At this point, other than what they presented at the meeting, which was the evaluation of the latest assessment.
I mean, if you spring this stuff on the public on the 5th, for example, people on the webinar, and then the 10th is the last day any comments can be, so you're gonna have to try to gather information, digest it, and have your comments in. And we all know the problem is hook and release mortality is not really the other mortalities. And the only way you can address that, we do have a season, but most of the states north of us do not have a season. So, we're doing our part in Virginia as far as recreational and the commercial. We've seen a lot of reductions on the commercial side, and we've never been over.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, this.
until
yeah.
you get, Robert Raleigh brought this up at ASMFC with Chairman Bill and said, well, we're going to have a closed season now. And he told him it wasn't going to happen because the vote's not there, and we're not going to close the season. So you're just slowly going down the drain, basically. And their stock assessment's very weak. You know, we use the fact that global warming is causing a lot of things to change. It may very well be causing where the fish or where there's ain't in the fish may not be there anymore. We saw an abundance of small striped bass in the ocean this year in the spring, which you don't see. So why they were there, I can't tell you. But, you know, it's a shame they didn't share more with you so you could share more with us, and it's not your fault, it's their fault.
And the timeline is not great for the Chesapeake Bay states because it's, we do start our commercial fishery much earlier. So that is, the timing is really bad for us.
And evidently, we're having poor recruitment the last few years. Is that the same in the Hudson and the Delaware, or just us, the Chesapeake Bay?
No, this is coast-wide.
Yeah.
It is, they're having
This is
the same problems.
It's one assessment for the full Atlantic coast,
Yeah.
so they don't differentiate amongst them, but I believe, I don't have all of the
A
indices
lot of
up
times
here.
we're 3/4 of the recruitment comes from the Chesapeake Bay.
There are, I believe, 4 or 5 different juvenile indices that go into the assessment. Pretty much all of them are giving us the same signal.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions from the committee? Questions from the audience? Striped bass. Seeing none, what do you need from us? Just to inform us?
This is really an FYI.
Yeah, there's nothing we can do about it one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, really, we want you to be aware of the engagement opportunities and let folks know that this is the avenue for having something to say to ASMFC. But at this point, we are still, I and the other people on the ASMFC technical committee are still going through and running numbers based off of board's decisions, and yeah, we're just really crunched on a timeline for having to come up with new calculations to meet the decisions and then turn around and make more decisions.
Thank you.
Hey, Jeff?
Sir,
So for summarizing on the commercial side, in 2025, we will see a 7% quota cut.
Carrying
which
over
was
from,
2024's actually.
right, carrying over from
So any
2024.
quota cut that ASMFC comes up with would be implemented in 2026?
No, we can't do it that, we are not able to do it
How
that
do
way
you
this
do
year.
that with your tags already purchased?
We will be here on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day.
So we could very likely have more than a 7% cut.
Yes. Unfortunately, yes, that's,
Now, the recreational side did they take their 7% cut in 2024?
they took considerably more than a 7% cut.
Okay.
And that has been on the table also. We were asked to consider what a cut would look like if it was fully borne by recreational or if it was divided evenly amongst commercial and recreational, and those decisions also have yet to be made.
all right. Question brewing in the mind there?
Yeah, I mean, you miss an opportunity like this, when we're all together and we have an audience, to expand on what Ernie said, that we've been watching and knowing for years. And there's a couple of big things. And the biggest one is not that it's in Virginia, we're worried about recreational versus commercial doing their fair share. We've been making our fair share cuts the last 4 or 5 years in Virginia. The problem is the same one that I perceive that Ernie touched on. It's been going on for 20 plus years, and that is that the northern states are not taking the cuts that we are. And, it's important, I think, that we talk about this and that the audience hear it before they are going to make comments and know and get on your social media and look at what went on off of New York this summer and north into Massachusetts and look at what went on from May until now, and they're still fishing from May until now. And then ask yourself, do we want to fight amongst ourselves in Virginia, or do we want to address the real problem, and that's that we're growing the fish, spawning the fish, and protecting the fish so that the northern states can catch them. And y'all need to know that. And that's one person's opinion, but I think the data's there. I'm getting nods from staff. I'm getting nods from people up here. You know, we've been watching this for years. You know, we're taking it on the chin so that from New York north, they can hammer rockfish all summer long. And y'all need to know that, and we need to know that, and it's out there. You can go find the information. So it's hard for me to keep quiet and stay on course. I know we all want to get out of here on time, but I hate to miss the opportunity, Jeff, you know, to not remind people. And the only thing else I would remind people is that we haven't had a decent snowmelt in Virginia since 17. And if you look at that and you look at those year classes, it's not hard to figure out that a good snowmelt, when fish spawn in the upper reaches, like salmon, and which striped bass do, that's what we need. So, you know, it's not anybody's fault. Sometimes it's just Mother Nature. And when you look back into the 80s, in 83, that produced the biggest year class and the biggest group of striped bass we've ever seen in our lifetimes, the people in this room, that was from a snowmelt and from a year of spawns in the mid to late 80s that were incredible. So none of this is new. It's all out there. But we just need to be a little easier on ourselves in Virginia and a little hard on our neighbors up north. And also keep in mind that spawning and recruitment is dependent upon a lot of things out of our control, and snowmelt is one of them. That's all I got to say.
Well, thank you very much. Well done. Appreciate it. Next topic is cobia.
Well, I'm gonna call it good news. All right, so we're gonna move on to cobia. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Shanna Madsen. I am the Deputy Chief of Fisheries Management. We're gonna talk a bit about our recreational management measures that are gonna be changing for cobia. We went through an addendum process just recently. I'm sure many people were not aware of it because our public turnout was about 3 people. But Addendum 2 did pass, and there are some changes that are coming through with it that are actually pretty decent for Virginia. So we're going to call this a good news story. So Addendum 2 to Amendment 1 is what we just passed. The board started this addendum because there is a lot of increased cobia harvest in mid-Atlantic states, us very specifically, and a little bit smaller as well, Maryland. Also, additionally, because cobia are such a pulse species, the MRIP data obviously has a lot of uncertainty associated with it. So by doing state-by-state measures for recreationally caught species, it turns out that that's really not the best way to go about things, considering all the uncertainty there. So what does Addendum 2 do? So Addendum 2 modifies that recreational allocation framework. So everything I'm talking about today does not have anything to do with the commercial side of things. It's just the recreational side. So what we were doing before was there was a state-by-state framework. So each state had a soft target, and then every 3 years or so, we would take that soft target, compare it to how many fish that we caught, and then we would take those reductions accordingly. For those of you who were here back in 2021, we took like a 46% reduction. So this was why Addendum 2 was really initiated, because we were seeing such an increased amount of cobia in our waters that really we couldn't keep them off our hooks anymore. So what we ended up going with is grouping the coast into regions. So there's a northern region, which runs from Virginia up to Rhode Island, and then there's a southern region, which is North Carolina down to Georgia. Again, this was kind of done so that we could reduce some of that uncertainty with the MRIP numbers, instead of using those individual point estimates for each state. We also updated the recreational quota allocations and the time frame that was utilized. So previously we used 2006 through 2015 data. So obviously that's pretty old data, and we're seeing a lot more cobia in our waters in more recent times.
So we updated those numbers to have 50% of 2014 through 2023 data, and then 50% of 2018 through 2023 data, which is the same framework we used before, just updated years. Another thing that Addendum 2 added was it allows the board to update the allocations quickly when MRIP data are revised. We will have another MRIP calibration coming up in the near future, and so the board didn't want to have to write a whole other addendum for just the fact that we know that those MRIP numbers are going to vary. The other thing that we did is the board is now allowed to set management measures for 5 years instead of 3. Again, those point estimates can vary greatly, so the more years that we have in management measures, it kind of gives us a better idea of what's actually being caught out there. So since it's time, and now we have Addendum 2 in place, we have to do our recreational harvest evaluation. So we are looking at a harvest quota for our northern region where we're at. We now have 68.7%, and the southern region has 31.3%. And those allocation results need to be under the current coast-wide quota of 76,000 fish approximately. So what we need to do is essentially look and take an evaluation of each of those regions' average 2021 through 23 harvest against that target to determine if we have to take any management changes. So what we have here, we have our region, we have the recreational harvest target, which is again divided out by those percentages I had on your last slide. And then we have our 2021 through 2023 recreational harvest, and we can see the difference and what would need to be done to make sure that we get back down to that target. So good news for the northern region is, yes, we do have to take a 15% reduction. However, if you look at what Virginia would have needed to take alone, which is your last row there, Virginia would have needed to take what equates to essentially a 50% reduction had Addendum 2 not gone through. So this management change, in my mind, is a really, really, really big win for Virginia, considering the fact that if we had to take a 50% reduction, y'all would be looking at one fish bag limits, reductions in seasons. It would get pretty ugly out there. So 15% in comparison is not too shabby. And we've been working with the other states to kind of get that process going, which is what I'm presenting to you guys today. So as I mentioned before, we need to take that 15.9% reduction to make sure that our region is back down to its target. The changes now, because we're in a region, are that that northern region, Rhode Island to Virginia, needs to have the same size and vessel limit. However, because obviously cobia are going to be migrating throughout the year, the seasons can vary by state to make sure that it makes sense for the area that are catching cobia at that time. We are still, I would say, the very, very, very big lion's share of the catch in the northern region. So a lot of the states more north of us are kind of depending on us for our voice as to what makes sense for our fishery when it comes to that size and vessel limit. As a reminder, our minimum size limit cannot be below 40 inches total length per the fisheries management plan. So we cannot go any lower than we already are now. So this is our starting point. These are our current measures, just so everybody's kind of on the same page. Maryland and PRFC chose to follow Virginia with all of their management measures. So they've already got that 40-inch total length in, and then additionally for that second fish that's on your vessel, we only allow one fish over 50. The season is the same in those areas as well, June 15th through September 15th. However, the northern states have a much different management regime right now. They're looking at a 37-inch total length, only one fish, and their season is year-round. So how did we get to our new measures? So the TC was kind of tasked with looking at methods to address changing that size limit and changing the vessel limit. We can make some changes to the season. We're really the only ones who would actually make any difference if we changed our season. The northern states are not oftentimes running into cobia, so it's really kind of on us. We also can combine some of those things. So we can change our size limits, we can change our vessel limits, we can change our seasons, and we can put all of those together to make something that makes sense. And again, we pooled all of the MRIP data from 2021 to 2023 to get where we are now. So where are we at in the timeline and how can FMAC get involved? So the TC provided a wide range of management options that were estimated to get that 15.9% reduction in the northern region. At the annual meeting, which was just a couple of weeks ago, the board approved that TC methodology and the full range of options. What we've been doing is now we have some time after that annual meeting for the entire region to sort of start to have these conversations about what makes sense for us as a region. As long as the states in the northern region can come to consensus on what measures to implement, we will submit our implementation plan by January 1st of 2025, and then the board would consider that via email vote. I don't anticipate us not being able to come to consensus. However, if we did not, just so you are aware, the ASMFC Management Board would make that decision for us. But I really don't see this being a problem. We do regional management with a lot of other species, and it works out well. Once that implementation plan is in, all of the states will have until April 1st, 2025 to make sure that those management measures are in place. Obviously, that's well before we're starting to see cobia in our waters, so we'll be good to go there. So, management considerations. The northern region managers all got on the phone to just kind of have a quick discussion a couple of weeks ago. We kind of just took the pulse of every state to see what really mattered to them, like what was the main driving force for them. So as we were going through things, and I'm sure all of you are very aware, we catch cobia earlier in the year than all the other states. We're out there drilling them pretty early. So we didn't want to shorten the beginning of the season because that didn't really make any sense to us, given the fact that that just means you're going to have higher discard mortalities because guys are going to be out there anyway. We know the fish are in our waters, so let's not make a change at the beginning of the season. Maryland, on the other hand, is seeing fish a bit later than us. So their request was, let's not shorten the end of the season. Talking to the New England states, they catch on a much larger group of fish than we do. So a slot limit would be very, very hard for them to implement, meaning they probably couldn't catch any fish at all if we put a slot limit in place. So we discussed not implementing a slot limit. And what we have heard previously from you all is that our charter vessels really use that 2-fish vessel limit to draw folks in so that they can take charter trips. So we've heard previously that you all don't want to reduce that vessel limit, but now's your time to go ahead and tell me if that has changed for some reason. So I've put together kind of a short list, I think, of management options that all of the states said might be feasible for one reason or the other. We didn't love any of them except for the one that you see highlighted in yellow, and that's the one at the last line for anybody who's colorblind. What that does is it puts us up to a 43-inch minimum, but we keep our 2-fish vessel limit. We keep our entire season, and because that reduction is just a bit over that 15.9%, we kind of tack some extra days then onto the end to try to help Maryland out, and we would go to September 20th versus September 15th. So we're actually getting you 5 extra days there with an increase of 3 inches. So I'm gonna leave this up on the screen. I'm gonna, let the committee ask me any questions that you have, and then we should, cut to the audience before the committee makes any final decisions.
Hey, Shannon, did you, I'm sure you guys looked at it, but like the 42-inch minimum with just a full season, did that not meet the reduction?
Won't meet the reduction. It's just not enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are all the options, meaning number 2, 3, 4, and 5? On the first one, it says one may be over 50. Does that go away with all of the other options?
Yeah, so that's kind of up to us. So the TC looked at that one over 50 to see if it really made any changes. And quite frankly, there's just not enough information on figuring out whether or not that impacts our catch or not. So we could go more straightforward and kind of just keep it at 2 fish. That would be my recommendation, to keep things kind of as clean as possible, because likely, potentially in the future, who knows if we're gonna be facing more reductions. So if this is a management measure that isn't really changing much and we can't figure out what that means for our overall catch, in my opinion, I'd slide that one out of there.
Instead of adding 5 days on at the end of the season for Maryland, this year, June 13th is a Friday.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we add 2 days on at the beginning for Virginia and let Maryland have 3 days at the end? It gives you guys an extra 2 days.
Because the value of a June day and a September day are very different. The value of a June day is very high. So when we took those cuts a few years ago, when we sawed off those first few weeks of June, that got us a lot of our reduction. So it wouldn't be the same. I don't even know if we'd be able to eke 1 day out without it. Just, it wouldn't equate to the same.
Shannon,
Yeah.
do we know what or have a way of knowing what the ratio of the 43-inch fish caught versus the 40-inch fish?
Meaning how much that's gonna reduce us by, or, yeah, I mean, essentially, that's all we're doing here. So when we do that 43-inch minimum, just adding those 3 extra inches is getting us a 20.5% reduction. We decided to add those extra 5 days so we get closer to just the 16% reduction, but that's really it right there. That's where your bread and butter is for the reductions.
Okay, any other comments from the committee?
Just to thank her for her work on this, and thank you for what you did. You know, if you listen to where these decisions came from, you saved us on that, so thank you.
I
those of you
very
who
much
don't know,
appreciate that.
the Virginia delegation really fought hard for us, and you guys mainly.
Yep, thank you, Sean.
Anything from the audience? This gentleman has a question. If you come up and say your name and.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
What would the difference be if it was closed for a week in July? That's peak effort according to the numbers from the past 10 years.
Right, so the problem is, first of all, that we can't just take a week. So one of the, 2 weeks, you're starting to lose a lot. So the,
Could you give us back June 1st and September 30th?
I can't do, that would not work out. It wouldn't work out that way. So taking stuff in the middle of the season, the problem is that the law enforcement committee for ASMFC, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna be up here so y'all can hear me a little better. The law enforcement committee for ASMFC went through and essentially gave us a guidance document that says that we need a certain amount of time in between if we're making 2 seasons. So if we were breaking that season up, that 2 weeks would more than likely not be enough, / would be too much. So we don't want y'all taking it at a time when, if you just keep it at the front of the season, you're okay.
Okay, next question. How come we're not waiting until after the MRIP recalibrations are done to make regulation changes?
Would you like to take a 50% cut?
Do you think that's gonna happen when they recalibrate?
You would take a 50% cut if we didn't have addendum 2 go through. So if we had waited for those MRIP calibrations in 2026, 2027, 2028, you would have had to have taken that 50% cut this year, right now, and 2025 is what you would have gotten.
So does that mean we have a 50% cut in years coming up?
We don't know, honestly, I can't tell you. So right now,
This addendum allows the board to set those management measures for 5 years. So I would say that the timeline for setting these management measures, as well as the timeline for an MRIP update, as well as the timeline for a new stock assessment, are all kind of falling on the same pattern. So I really can't tell you after 5 years whether it's gonna look like a reduction or whether it's gonna look like we can take an increase. That's all gonna be dependent.
It'll be locked in for 5 years.
Exactly. If the board votes that way, we can go up to 5 years. I think most of the board would like to lock in 5 years so that there aren't so many management whiplashes, so y'all know what you get for 5 years.
Last question I have, for the 43-inch minimum with 2 fish, is that still just 1 fish over 50 inches, or that's, you can keep 2 fish over 50 inches?
So again, when I think, somebody asked me that question, Alex did. So when we were, when the TC was going through these reductions, essentially they couldn't figure out what it meant to keep that stipulation or not keep that stipulation. They didn't know if it would gain us anything. They didn't know if it would take anything away from us. So in my opinion, I would get rid of that stipulation for now so that if something comes up in the future, we have a little bit more of a buffer. So if the committee and the public would like to go to 2 fish over 43 inches, there will no longer be that.
That's the percentage. Use that as a selling point. I just don't understand the whole motion behind it, and if we're really doing it for the fish, then, why are we gonna start killing the big breeders?
Yeah.
I mean, I like what you're doing there as far as putting ammo in your back pocket, but, I just don't see if we're doing that, why we have to lower. Essentially, we're hurting the fish more than we are helping it in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a consideration for the committee and the public to make. We don't have any real game in this fight. The northern states are already catching on that much larger population of fish. I will tell you that I think by the calculations that I had, only 1/3 of our vessels are even catching 2 fish. Most everybody is just catching 1 fish. So that 2 fish vessel limit is really a great selling point, I think, for the charter captains, but your everyday guy out on the water is keeping 1 fish and he's not keeping anything else.
Could I get your names, please, gentlemen? Okay. You got that?
Are there gonna be any changes to the commercial regs?
No, not as a result of this action. The commercial regs stay exactly the same.
And the stock assessment has been pushed off, 3 years now?
Yeah,
And Virginia's been the most proactive with regulations.
yeah.
Now the fish have another year to spawn, so the actual stock is larger.
Yeah. The assessment, so the problem with the assessment is, well, there's a lot of problems with the assessment. One of the problems with the assessment is we have the Southeast Fisheries Science Center as the lead on that assessment. They lost their lead scientist. So unfortunately, we don't have anyone to sort of lead the charge there. One of the other issues that this assessment is running into, because they originally attempted to just make this an update, which I think many of us knew was not going to flesh out the way that it did, we're starting to run low on, we don't have any fisheries independent information for cobia. So the stock assessment is taking its time because we're really struggling to figure out how to assess a species that doesn't have a lot of good information and is a pulse species. And additionally, we're running into issues with the timeline when the Southeast Fisheries Science Center is kind of the one that's running that charge. We're on the assessment committees, it's just.
What about all of Virginia's reporting data from the 3 years that we did mandatory reporting?
Yeah, so So Virginia's mandatory harvest reporting program was dissolved because the information from that reporting program was highly biased. So I gave a presentation, God, was that last year? I don't even remember the timeline anymore.
Almost 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago. Time has no meaning anymore, but essentially we sat down with the assessment scientists to talk about whether or not those data would be useful, and they said absolutely not. The only thing that we're able to really glean from that is discard lengths, and most angler reported programs like that, discard lengths are really the things that are super helpful, so that's still allowed. Like, we still have folks that are signing on to Saltwater Journal and are reporting their cobia just like they were before. It's just not required because the requirement was essentially causing people to get the permit. You could see it happen. People would get the permit, they'd go online immediately and hit no activity. So we're just, it's not working when you have 8,000 people out there with a permit and gosh knows how many without one still fishing. So the best that we've got right now is MREP.
Let's go back to the committee. Ernie has a question.
Yeah.
This is all recreational management, so I feel like the commercial status quo.
Yes.
Anybody else?
I have a question. Shauna, was that MRIP or APES information that showed that the 1/50 really wasn't making a big splash?
That's all we've got, unfortunately.
That's a message you probably ought to relay to the public, that, a lot of people have not a lot of faith in MRIP,
I
the
know.
old APRIP or APES, but here's an example where using that data they collected, likely going to remove the 1/50. That's not to say you have to.
You don't have to.
Have to do that.
No, you really don't have to. If that's something that Virginia decides that they want to keep in place as a conservation measure, they certainly can. But there is just no way to actually measure what the impact of having that limit in place is, especially given the fact that so many folks are actually only catching one fish.
And this issue is going to come before the commission in December for a vote?
No, this will come in front of the commission either February or March. But by then, we've hoped to have collected everybody's input so that we have something to present to the commission, as well as we need to get the rest of the region on board with these management measures.
So tonight you need from us a preference for one of those 4 options?
That would be absolutely lovely. That's what I'm looking for today.
Before we move to that, I want to make sure the audience, we got one other question first off, and then I want to make sure that the audience understands and hears what was just asked, about that one fish over 50, and the fact that if we did it, we wouldn't get credit for it later. We've done a lot for cobia in the last 15 years proactively that we didn't get credit for later. So I need y'all to be very careful of that, okay? If you want to do it for yourselves, charter guys say, hey, we're only going to kill 1/50, or we're going to do it at tournaments. But if you put it in writing and you say, oh, we're going to do this because we feel good about it, we're not going to get credit for it later. That's what they're saying. Y'all understand that? Just want to make sure everybody understands that. And then, Captain Hoffman, you of all people, we've done a lot of stuff for the right reasons and didn't get credit for it later. So anyway.
All the sacrifices we've taken, as far as.
I think one more person wanted to add something.
Targeting these fish, I can say with my experience, it's definitely the larger fish are more abundant. And that there's no argument about that. But I'm scared if we do implement that's gonna come around and bite us in the butt, because they're gonna look at those stock assessment numbers and say, well, damn, for the last 5 years, you've now killed larger fish, so therefore the size of the actual fish, the regular size fish is gonna be smaller, and then we're gonna pay for it twice as bad,
It's super hard to say. There's absolutely no way that I can predict how all of this is going to play out in the assessment, in the change in the MRIP calibrations. Things are incredibly uncertain.
Just crazy, we've been so proactive over the years,
The-
and we still get cut.
Yeah, the thing about it is, though, is when you get there, at least you have that room to give it. If they say, hey, wow, you've taken this one fish over, and you're still, the numbers are down, then you're gonna have to give more. Right now, they're acknowledging that not many people are killing that many, so I would just take that and, take it and run. And
Gentleman in the gray shirt.
Can you speak a little bit to maybe like the algorithm or the math that leads from the far left column size limit over to the estimated reduction? Is there any sort of insight into the math and how that works? Because what I don't see is examples of a over 40-inch minimum with still retaining the 1/50, what that equates to in terms of the estimated reduction.
So again, the 1/50, I'm never going to be able to tell you exactly what that means. However, I do have some slides that have slot limits if we would prefer to stay at the 40. Here, let me.
Hey, Jeff.
Minimum, that's this one.
And remind me, the target estimated reduction was 16%?
Correct.
Okay.
That's nice and peaceful, leave that up.
Right.
So these are some of the options that had a slot limit involved. So the problem with these slot limits was, again, we do need to be friendly to our nearest neighbors. They helped us out a lot on this addendum. And those folks up north are not catching fish that are small. They're catching the big ones. That's what's migrating up there right now.
northernmost range, the biggest.
We have another question from the committee.
Hi, Shannon. Do we have a portable mic? There's great comments and great questions. I don't think it's audible online. Correct me if I'm wrong with that.
I think some people can hear it, but we do have a mic.
Okay. Yeah. Just, I'd like to go back and look at this again.
All right,
Folks can also come up here, but I know a lot of people don't like coming to the
Well,
podium.
I know, we shouldn't scare people, we,
Were you able to speak a little bit to the math in terms of how you get from the left side to the right side? I'm trying to understand the difference. If you go back to that original slide with the highlighted, those couple of days, that the variance between ending on the 15th of September and the 20th, shows a variance from 17 to 20%. Is it broken out as is it prorated per day, the estimation? And is it different prorations for early June versus mid-July?
Yes.
Yep, that was the whole issue with the ask if we could have more in June versus more in September. June days are gonna be worth a lot more because that's when we're nailing them and we are the lion's share of the catch. So all of this is calculated in combination with trying to figure out if modifications to the season get us there or if changes to that slot get us there. All of this is taking those issues and combining them. We have a equation essentially that combines all of the percent reductions and is able to give us that final output that you see in the last column.
Captain Luke, you might maybe direct it to the technical committee. They could probably get you the real details on that. But what she's talking about is there are conservation equivalencies. Inches give you so much versus days give you so much. There is an answer that you're looking for. It's probably putting her a little on the spot. The technical committee might be able to.
I mean, Brooke's here and she's done these calculations, but the answer isn't really any different.
Yeah, I was just curious, you gave me the answer, broad strokes, in terms of kind of how you're getting there.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get into the nitty gritty of
I don't want to do algebra.
How long do you have?
yeah, exactly.
okay, from,
Final question, did y'all toy around at all with the idea of a larger season and then parts of the season, one fish or two fish?
So we didn't, did we? I don't think we did, because that was not a request.
Part of the problem with trying to look at a larger season than what we have historically had is that we don't have data outside of the season that already exists. So it's very hard to extrapolate and say what would happen if we opened earlier because we don't have data from that time period.
That's fair. And last comment on the saltwater journal thing.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree with you, and this is something that we've discussed with the Saltwater Journal before. I've seen a lot cleaner apps that we could be utilizing to collect that sort of information. I think hopefully, as we fill in some positions, we can maybe get people to look into making those things a little bit easier to access, because I agree with you. It's a bumpy ride.
Well, that's encouraging to hear that that's something you guys want to revisit, because I think your best, besides charter guides, who are probably your best source of information, I think capturing actual data from recreational anglers is your next best. I don't know how much the science can do without actually being out there and seeing the numbers that happen every single day.
Yeah, I'll tell you that it's incredibly helpful to a species that is mostly recreationally caught for us to have things like discard data. So that's the sort of thing that hopefully through us revamping Saltwater Journal, it's definitely something that's, on the table being discussed. Maybe some focus groups would be great. Bring in some of you guys to tell us what what works for you. But those sorts of data are invaluable because, unfortunately, when we don't have fisheries independent data, there's obviously a subset of the population that we just can't sample. So quite a number of species, bluefish, striped bass, I think summer flounder, we use discard data from on the ground, from folks going out and actually reporting those data. The problem is that by forcing mandatory reporting, we were getting jacked up data instead of people who wanted to report. We were forcing folks to report. So they were just like, whatever I can get in so I don't get yelled at and get my, I can get my permit next year.
Yeah, it might be helpful in the future to help connect the why.
Yeah.
Because I'll just tell you, my perception was like this is going to be the beginning of an reduction, so to speak. But if we can sell the why as to the importance of it,
Yeah.
to help preserve what we already have, I think we could maybe anticipate more authentic data coming in.
Completely agreed. I think that, unfortunately, I wasn't here when this was implemented, so I had a little bit of issue with the program overall because it's certainly not the way that I would have necessarily done it, but I agree with you that us actually touching base and having real outreach and on the ground, guidance from folks is what's going to get us the best data. I actually worked in another state prior to this one that had a really good volunteer angler survey, and those data are worked into assessments. So it can be done. We just got to have the staff and money to be able to focus on it.
Shannon, do you want us to vote on this that you have up now or what you had up before?
So this is the slots. We don't. I hear a lot of grumbling, so let me go back to the other slide. So this is kind of the slide that I envisioned y'all being able to take a look at and kind of deciding where you wanted to go. Again, I highlighted that 43-inch minimum because to me that gave you guys the most flexibility and continued to keep our fishery strong. But we are welcome, we're welcome to look at 42-inch minimum if you want some changes to the season, 41-inch, again, changes to the season. So there's a give and a take dependent on what you think is important to keep.
Can we assume that we can take the one over 50 inches off that?
You can, but if the committee says that that's something that they'd be interested in doing as a conservation measure, they can also do that. So that's up to this group.
If it doesn't get us anything, I don't see any sense in considering that now. So the first one is 40-inch minimum.
So the first one right there is our status quo, just so you guys have that to be able to compare to what else is on the screen.
Can we say that is what we would have with a 40-inch minimum, 2 fish in that season?
So that's status quo right there.
Right, but without the...
So if you want the reduction and you want to keep a 40-inch minimum, you actually have to go down to 1 fish. That's the way you're gonna be able to finagle that, correct?
4 options we're voting on.
All right, anybody want to make a proposal? Make a motion?
I'll make a motion
Okay.
to adopt staff recommendation, option 5, the 43-inch minimum, or option 4, 43-inch minimum, 2 fish.
I'll second that.
What was that? You couldn't hear you back here?
I make a motion to go with option 5, 43-inch minimum, 2 fish.
Or technically, first one status quo.
Which season?
Highlighted option.
Go with the extra 5 days to get us to the 16.3, so June 15th through September 20th.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else have a preferred motion?
Second. You did have a second.
You got a second?
Yeah, we have a second for that. Shall we vote on it? Everybody in favor, raise their right hand. Satisfied? Okay.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate you taking time, listening to those ASMFC meetings. It's incredibly important. It was disappointing to only have 3 people here for that Amendment 2 issue because Virginia was pushing hard for that, and I needed backing.
We appreciate what you did, because 50% would have been devastating. Thank you for what you did.
No problem.
It takes us to, I'm sorry.
I just like to say, I don't think we can stress what Chris said enough. The fact is, any reductions you have comes from where you are today. What you did, to try to help the fish on your own, it's gonna have no bearing on your reduction. They're gonna say, this is what you had in place, we want you to reduce 20% from there. So, and we had something in place that you can't even quantify, evidently, the 50-inch, so, it probably does something. At least it makes people feel good, like the nice flowers we had up there a little while ago, but thank you.
And it takes us to blue catfish.
All right, this is going to be talking about blue catfish. It's been a hot topic in FMAC meetings. It's grown to a big topic outside of FMAC meetings. There's been a lot of press and studies about how much of our native species and our commercially important native species that blue catfish are eating. So that's gotten a lot of attention to how can we sort of curb the spread of invasive species. And if there's a market for it, we would like to take advantage of that. So I'm going to give some background information about the blue catfish fisheries and harvest, and then hopefully open it up to get some recommendations from the committee and the public. So 2015 is the first year we have where catfish harvest was reported by species. It used to be just catfish, so you couldn't tell what species was what. So starting in 2015, this is blue catfish harvest. It's been up and down. As of 2023, we've exceeded 3 million pounds. Here's essentially that same graph, but now by gear. So you can see how much of the harvest is being taken by each gear each year. And I will note that there are gears that have a lot of harvest, but are confidential. So those have been removed from this graph. So you don't always see the same gears year after year. As far as how that looks over the whole fishery, this is what percentage of harvest averaged across these years is taken by each gear. So pots and traps is mostly fish pots and hoop nets. Those take almost half of our blue catfish every year. That category does contain eel pots, crab pots, but the majority is fish pots and hoop nets. Most of the other prevalent gear are around 10 to 15%. Pound net, haul seine, electric shock, gill net, and then trot line with 5%.
ask a question? Do you have a count of how many watermen caught that?
Yes, so the pot and trap category includes, depending on the year, 30 to 40 reporters. The gill net is 70 to 100. Haul seine is 3 to 6. Pound net is 5 to 10. Trot line is 10 to 15. And electrofishing is 3.
On the gill net, the blue catfish are primarily a bycatch fishing for rockfish.
Yeah, that's probably why there are so many of the gill nets reported.
Okay.
So, as most of you are aware, blue catfish was introduced to Virginia in the 1970s and has since spread pretty much throughout the state. What we want to talk mostly about today is electrofishing. So electrofishing is primarily a scientific collection method. As far as I've been able to tell, we have the only commercial electrofishing fishery in the country. There could be some elsewhere. I haven't found any evidence of that. An electrical current is run through the water, and it temporarily stuns the fish, usually for, up to a minute, and then they swim away. It's usually one boat with a generator on it, and then there's some more boats that are maneuverable, and they'll go around scooping fish. And at low frequencies, which we define as less than 15 hertz, only catfish are affected. So while there is electrofishing for a broader collection of species, those are generally at high frequencies. So there was an experimental fishing permit for electrofishing from 2014 to 2017 that gave us the data we used to discuss bringing on a commercial electrofishing fishery. And in 2020, it did become a regulated fishery. So there's 3 licenses on the James, technically the Pamunkey and the Rappahannock. But as I said, regional-wide, there has been interest in increasing blue catfish harvest, and in Virginia, for a lot of people, that has been seen as expanding the electrofishing fishery. That's not the only solution. There is a bottleneck in the processing sector. So one thing that the legislature has done is to create this Governor's Blue Catfish Processing, Flash Freezing, and Infrastructure Grant. That's been given out for 2 years. Most recently, about 2 weeks ago, they announced one went to Amory's to increase, is your flash freezing?
Yes.
So by allowing more capacity to buy and process catfish, it might make it more feasible for people to harvest and sell their catfish. Because with that bottleneck, there's occasionally times where people are told, we can't buy your fish. We don't have the room for it. So we would like to not have that happen. So staff have been working on possible management changes to the electrofishing fishery. There's the potential to expand the number of licenses, to expand areas. We've been looking at potentially expanding into the Mattaponi River, the Chickahominy, to expand or remove the size limit, which this committee has talked about before. Other changes which won't necessarily increase the number of catfish being harvested, removing the eligibility constraints. So currently in regulation, to get a license, you have to have a history of catfish harvest. We could potentially remove that and allow more people to be eligible for one of the licenses. And then slightly off that topic, there's been some discussion about one of the prohibitions is you cannot electrofish within 100 yards of a public boat ramp, fishing pier, or where people are using the water, like for swimming or diving. So the problem is that language is a little vague. So someone might read it as public boat ramps and public fishing piers. Some people say only the boat ramps are public, the fishing pier could be public or private. So we are looking to make that language more specific to make sure staff, watermen, law enforcement, judges are all interpreting it the same way. So what we're looking for today is to open up the discussion to the committee, to the public. What would you like to see changed in the electrofishing fishery? And hopefully once we get some recommendations for electrofishing specifically, are there any changes to the catfish fishery as a whole to improve the fishery, make things easier on industry, increase harvest? But as I said, we would like to start with electrofishing, have a recommendation for that staff can use.
What does it take for a fisherman to get involved with that? How expensive is the equipment?
I'm sorry?
How expensive is the equipment?
I've heard various estimates, anywhere from $20,000 to $40,000.
Okay.
If,
Okay, so just for the shock unit, 22,
But if
and
you
then on
got-
top, okay, and then on top of that would be the vessel, the chase boats, the nets.
so, Dave Johnson did a grant request for $100,000 to buy a complete setup with everything. That was the estimate for that. If you don't have the aluminum boat, you don't have the apparatus, and you don't have the chase boat or the scoop boat.
Okay, any questions from the committee for her? Any questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
I have could you add the Potomac tributaries
When we
below
get
the
through
Colonial
with this.
Beach as an option area?
If that's a recommendation FMAC wants to make, we could.
I have something to say. The Mattapanai, I could not raise the fish in when I first started.
Okay.
And the Chickahominy, it's only a few places that they actually raise. So a lot of this place that you can go, it looks good on paper, but the fish will not come on. The Appomattox is useless.
Mm.
And it's all based on conductivity at the time. The conductivity has to match the fish's conductivity. So you can have a heavy rain that washes down to James, and it'd be useless for 3-4 days. Or you can go to the Pamunkey and raise fish, or the Rappahannock and raise them. And then you can go back to the James and raise them where the Pamunkey is useless. So locking people in certain spots is, it's just hard to raise them, because you go to a spot, you raise fish, they won't come up for 3 to 5 days like they should. And if you go back the very next day, it's gonna be 6 or 7 days before they come back up.
Mm.
So the more you hit a spot, the less you see, and the harder it's gonna be to catch them. I caught as many, probably as me and Chris together, when I could jump back and forth from river to river, before it was narrowed to little spots.
Okay.
Because, 25 inches is a small catfish to be able to top us out at catching. 25 to 32 inches, I could catch 1,200-1,400 pound a day before the law came in.
Mm.
And that's a lot of extra spots I have to hit to catch 1,200-1,400 pounds. If you let more people in, you really need to think about just having a free-for-all, just call in wherever we go, and whichever river is working the best at the time is where people can go. And you'll see that the catch is gonna go down dramatically, and a lot of people are gonna spend a lot of money for nothing.
All right, sir, the audience.
I've got a question.
I'll get back to you in just a second. This gentleman's been waiting.
Use the mic, because they can't hear you.
I've got quite a bit about this catfishing. I work on the Upper Rappahannock, and number one, we're the last one to see crabs, we're the last one to see the rockfish, and we depend on these catfish for a living. And when they come up there and shock these fish, we don't catch them. They don't pot, they don't bite a hook, and they don't trap. And it's destroying my family's living up there by allowing this to happen. And I can show you some numbers right here in this book. They didn't shock a whole lot up there in 22 and 23. And it's just some numbers I threw together last night. But in April and May, we done pretty good. There was no shocking up there then. June was okay. We caught a few fish. First week of July, we caught a few fish. And then this year, they shocked up there more than they ever have, and our numbers went to 0. In July of 2022, we caught 52,000 pounds of catfish in the pound net. In 2023, we caught 55,000. This year, we caught 15,000. In August of 22, we caught 52,000. In 23, we caught 43,000. This year, we caught 4,600 pounds of catfish out of 3-pound nets. The fish do not trap. I don't know if it kills them or if they go to the bottom and just lay there or what they do, but it's destroying my living. So if you open more of these up, what you're going to do is destroy one man's way of catching them to allow somebody else to catch them.
Thank you.
They won't go in a pot, and anybody, there's a bunch of us sitting right here that'll tell you that catfish pot, trot line, and pound net, when they shock, you don't catch them. They quit.
Could we get your name,
So
please?
you're destroying our living to open it up for somebody else to make a living.
Could we get your name, please?
James Fisher.
All right, James.
I've been fishing trap nets on the Rappahannock for 30 years for blue catfish. I go way back, and if you allow more fisheries, the problem we've got now is we have nowhere to sell the fish. One week you can sell 10-pound fish, one week you can sell 2-pound fish, one week you can sell them all. And I know there's 2 grants been given. Both of those grants were given to places that's already processing catfish. Nobody is doing anything about opening new places. So we're not gaining anything. If you put 10 more electro boats out there, what are you going to do with the fish? You're going to have no market to sell them.
Thank you. All right, we had another question up here.
I was asking what effects that has on other fisheries. What,
Okay.
you know, is there documentation scientifically that show electroshocking causes problems for fish trapping?
So one of the experimental fishing gears, they did have shocking. It was with fish pots, hoop nets. They had a line that had electrofishing near it and a line that didn't. And I don't believe there was a significant difference between the 2 lines. That's the data we had going into.
How long was the study done for?
It was a fishery resource grant, so it was one season.
There's, Alexa, currently there's an offset from other fishing gear types for electrofishing. I think it's 300 feet, is it? Yes. You can't shock within 300 feet of other gear types like pound nets and gill nets and other things. And is that proven to be effective, or does it need to be further, or?
It's from fixed fishing gear.
Right.
So not
It would be pound
anything
nets.
movable. I don't know.
Go ahead.
So my question to that gentleman, do you feel like if they added more electric shock permits, if they widened the distance to fixed fishing gear, would that help? What kind of?
More electrofishing is going to hurt us. I mean, you heard the numbers that I gave you. These are accurate numbers. I've sent the reports in. Y'all have them here. And again, if you put more shock boats out there, they're going to be there shocking more. In 300 feet, my pound nets are a fixed device. I pay an extra fee or a higher fee for a fixed device fishing license. If you're going to continue to allow it, it shouldn't be any shocking within a mile of my nets when you know I'm fishing for catfish. They're targeting the fish that I'm catching them. And to catch fish in a pound net, the fish are swimming upriver and downriver with the tide. So if he comes around and shocks all around my pound net within 300 feet, below it, above it, right in front of it, for a week, I'm done. I'm not going to catch any fish.
Right, so you think a mile would be more realistic?
Absolutely, at least a mile away from gear that you know that somebody is targeting catfish.
Right. I understand exactly where you're coming from on the eastern shore, you know, when they're catching flounder, obviously in pound nets, the gill netters are doing the same thing, so it does cut off. So I understand where you're coming from with that.
Yes, sir. Well, I've been doing this for 30 years, and this year is going to be the worst reporting that you've seen from pound netting on the upper Rappahannock, because the month of August, we caught 4,600 pounds of fish, and I should catch more fish than that in one day. I've seen 30,000 pounds in a pound net before at one time.
So do we have information on what the electroshock boats did in that month? In that area? That could have affected that, or maybe they just weren't fishing that area. Maybe, in other words. did
It's
the
something
electroshock
staff could
boats
look
catch-
at if there's any type of relationship between electrofishing harvest and other gears harvest. I will say that we cannot report electrofishing harvest by area because that would be confidential. And I do want to correct myself that the regulation prohibits electrofishing within 100 yards of any marked commercial fishing gear.
This gentleman said that he's been catching oil twice now. Once 40 years, once 30 years. He's catching blue catfish, is that right?
I've been doing it for 30 years, yes, sir.
I didn't think the blue catfish had been around that long.
75. They introduced them in 75, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, they introduced them in 75.
all right.
The market has always been an issue for us
When we first got into this catfishing, I got into it with my uncle in the 90s. And like I said earlier, one week you can sell one size fish, and next week you may only be able to sell another size fish. And Nixon's in North Carolina became one of the best markets we had. They started buying all size catfish. And it worked out good for a year, and then so many more people got into it. Again, the more people that you put into the fishery, the less market we have. And it got to the point where Nixon says, hey, I'm loaded with fish. I can't take any fish this week. Or Pearson Seafood in Colonial Beach, I sell to them. When you pile 20, 30,000 pounds in there on him at a time, he's sitting on fish he can't sell them. So catching the fish is not the issue we're facing here. Processing and market is the problem we're facing. We don't need more people in the fishery. We need more places to sell the fish.
Well,
So the problem for anyone not familiar is some number of years ago, most Finfish are under the auspices of the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. A farm bill put into place that anything other than domestic farmed catfish would fall under the auspices of the USDA, who do things like cattle and chicken. So they have completely different inspection procedures. So any processor that wants to process catfish has to have a USDA inspector come to their facility. Unfortunately, while it targets the foreign catfish, it also targets domestic wild caught. And that is a major problem with getting new, smaller facilities to process catfish, because if they want to process outside of a typical workday, they have to pay for the inspector. So there's big barriers. There's been, we've been discussing for years ways to alleviate that. I believe some legislators out of Maryland, maybe 2 or so years ago, had a letter asking, can there be a permit exempting Chesapeake Bay wild caught catfish, something to make it easier to process our domestic wild caught. Because if we increase processing, we can reach buyers who want larger volumes, and that will allow more harvests to be sold.
So what is our goal? Are we trying to just catch more of these blue catfish? Is it invasive, or I don't understand the goal other than adding, again, more people to the fishery and still not having a way of processing it or selling it.
I think the goal for most of us on this committee is we want to get rid of the blue catfish as much as we can because they're eating crabs and other fish and species that are important to us as well. They're an invasive species, and it's not good for us. Maybe good for some of it, the audience, but it's not good for us.
I agree with that gentleman. If you can't move them, what's the sense of putting more boats in the fishery? Do you have a problem? In other words, are you having to cut boats off? Do you need more
Yeah,
fish?
I mean, that's, the problem isn't getting the fish. The problem is the market. We need more market. We've talked to the state. We've talked to the governor's office. We're trying to get more money. We've talked with Maryland also and working together to get marketing money to market these better. It's a catfish. Unfortunately, you're competing against 90% of the catfish in this country is consumed is farm raised, or most of it's imported also. And we have to cut it and process it here in Virginia and compete against that foreign product. It's a much better product. I don't know who here has eaten it. It's a great fish fillet. It really is. But you still have to sell it as a catfish, and that's our biggest problem. We really need to market it better. We need to get the word out to people. And hopefully, at one point, we thought there was going to be $4 million in marketing money from Virginia, and that got cut back to $250,000. But we're after that. We're looking at, considering having a state of emergency declared in this fishery in the Chesapeake Bay. Maryland's looked into that. If you could get a federal designation of a fisheries emergency, fisheries disaster, it could free up money to market more of this stuff. And those are things we're looking at and trying to do. I know Bob Fisher did the study with George years ago on whether or not electrofishing affected hoop nets. And the data that came out of that was it really didn't have that much effect. They had a control area and an area they shocked, and the catch in the areas was the same. That was one study. Right. I mean, what we're hearing is it does have an effect. From a lot of people, we're hearing that. I think we need more information on that before you start adding a lot of electrofishing to the states. I think maybe allowing some of the boats to go to different places instead of restricting the smaller areas might help. On the harvest side of things. But George, David, some of those people that are doing it can talk more about that. But absolutely, we need, as a state, a region, to market this stuff better and get the word out there. Because it is a good product, but it's also having a huge effect on our local species. Virginia Tech did a study, and the amount of poundage that these catfish eat a day in the Chesapeake Bay is mind-boggling. It's 50 million pounds they eat a day, kind of thing. I mean, these things are voracious eaters. There's not a lot of other predators that eat these catfish, and it's a real concern. So yeah, we do need to catch more. We do need to market more. It's a good fishery. I mean, if you can catch 100,000 pounds and sell it and make some money, great. But we've got to find better markets for this stuff, and that's what we're all trying to do.
So right now, you can't sell all you're getting, so
No.
there's no sense in adding.
No, I mean, we're
boats.
dumping
There's no
some
sense
for
in adding
cost
boats if you
at
can't.
times. It's
And-
terrible.
And I understand what you're saying about the electrofisher being confidential, but his data's not. He's got the fixed fishing net, so I'm just fixed fishing gear. I'm just after, did that really affect him this year, or were there maybe no fishing area? Is that, what is the truth behind that? So understanding the data of what the electrofisher men were doing would answer that question, if they caught those fish or they didn't.
It's something I will definitely look into. Just how much I can report out will be limited.
I think what, Alexia, you might be able to report out is if there's a correlation or not.
Right,
Not
that's
any
all I'm getting at.
specifics under the 3 fishermen in that market that you can't disclose that harvest, but you could say if there's a correlation between what this gentleman is reporting and versus what the other commercial fishermen are doing.
Right, if he's
You could
down.
say if it's correlated or not, and then you can move on, and it doesn't disclose any of their proprietary information.
Yeah, it's something I will look into, as well as not just overall harvest, but like catch per unit effort. How has catch per trip changed for the different gears? That's something I'm definitely going to look into. And as far as marketing goes, I do want to mention that Virginia is part of the invasive catfish work group under the Sustainable Fisheries Goal Implementation Team. That's got members from all the Chesapeake Bay jurisdictions, all the state agencies, VMRC, DWR, Mike Hutt on the Marine Products Board is on it. So I know he's been doing a lot about the marketing, about looking into new markets, getting Virginia into them, or getting Chesapeake Bay catfish into them. We've got academics, we've got food banks. We have all sorts of people who are interested to see where blue catfish could go.
So,
Just like,
so I have a suggestion, and maybe we can vote on this. On expand the number of licenses, keep it the same, based on Jeff Fisher and Jeff Morris in the back. Expand the areas, add Potomac tributaries, because there is virtually no commercial fishing at the head of the Nominee, head of the lower Machotic, and up in Colonial Beach and the 2 creeks there, but stay below, don't go above Colonial Beach. On expand, remove size limit, absolutely. Have no size restrictions on commercial electric fishing. There's no size restrictions on all the other gear type. Why have size restrictions on the electric shot guys? Since we're not going to expand the licenses, we don't need to worry about eligibility constraints. And the fishing pier proximity, you guys are going to work on rewording that regulation so that the 3 guys won't get a ticket again. But I would open up the areas so that, as George mentioned, if the Rappahannock is not good, they can go to another area. And by adding the Potomac tributaries, that gives them one more area to go to that's untapped. That's not going to affect pound netters like Jeff Fisher. So I think that is something that we could vote on.
Is that going to be a motion?
What do you think? All right, so I'll make a motion.
All right, hold on a
Go
minute.
back to that list. Pardon me? Okay. Yeah, so I make a motion to leave the number of licenses the way it is. But status quo, but we might as well take the word experimental off of it. Expand the areas, and that is 2 parts. Let the 3 guys bounce between the rivers and add Potomac tributaries.
All right, hold on a second, Mike. I'm writing this down as fast as I can. So, yeah, I am going to type this up eventually. Just if we want this up on the screen, I have to write it first. So, same number of licenses, take experimental out. What was next?
On expanding the areas, yes, add Potomac tributaries. and allow the 3 permit holders to move freely between the rivers.
Mike, why would we limit it to Potomac tributaries? How about other tributaries all the way down the bay?
What other, oh yeah, what other tributaries below the bay are there?
Down the Potomac, below the Potomac?
Pardon me?
Below the Potomac? I don't know.
I'm sorry.
He's saying add the Potomac.
Add.
He's saying, but what about below that? Are there any
They're already open.
tributaries in,
They're already open. They're already open to be fishing.
They're not, they're very restricted on where they can fish right
They
now.
are?
Very
So,
restricted.
not to disrupt, you can make whatever motion you would like. I will say that currently in the regulation, the areas are constricted to the main stem of the James, the Rappahannock, the Pamunkey, in order to kind of decrease user conflicts, which tend to increase in the tributaries.
So I would leave those the same, but I would add the Potomac tributaries below the 301 bridge.
Okay.
And I would remove the season dates because electric shocking only works when the water is 70 degrees or more. So why have a season date on there? With climate change, it could be 70-degree water in June. So let's just eliminate the dates in the regulations.
No time of year
No
restriction.
time of year restrictions. On the expand, remove the size limits, absolutely do that. The electric shocking gear is the only gear that has any size limits on it. But if there's that includes getting rid of the 32-inch for all other gear types. But the electric shocking has, you can't have more than 10 fish over 25 inches.
All right.
And then, if we remove the eligibility constraints, that's really OBE if we're not going to expand the number of licenses. And then on change fishing pier proximity, there's nothing for us to vote on that. You guys are going to reword the regulation.
Couldn't you just make that a licensed fishing pier? That way,
The problem is what license? What defines a licensed fishing pier?
me going down and buying a $50 license saying, I don't want y'all shocking around my pier. I have a license. Y'all can tell us where the license are bought, so we have to stay away from it.
So you're suggesting creating a license for like no-go zones?
People like that buy a $50 licensed fishing pier license, then we'll know that that dock is off limits. Because all the docks kind of look the same. We don't know if it's a fishing pier or a dock.
Well, I think one of the options.
Hey, Alexa, George this is such a controversial topic. I would suggest I think we should not have this in the motion, that staff needs to have a separate meeting with the commercial guys and the public to sort out the disagreements between how close electric shocking can be to business piers. That it is so controversial.
And
I think we should
fishing devices.
it should be a separate meeting. Because we could discuss this with the public and amongst us and not come into any agreement by 10 o'clock tonight. But I think the low-hanging fruit is item 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Okay.
Can we read that motion back?
Please.
So I'm going to write it all on a slide for everyone to be able to look at.
While Alexa's preparing that, Jeff, I'd just like to add that I think the governor's office is trying to work out an increase in our market nationally, globally, by some of these grants and other things, something I've discussed with the commissioner in the past, is the governor's office is trying to increase this, but it's gonna take time to get more processing facilities that fall into the USDA guidelines. That's a barrier to, buying more catch. In the meantime, our issue facing us is the voracious appetite of blue catfish on whether it's blue crab or menhaden or anything else that they can get themselves around, they'll eat it, And that's,
I'm sorry, go ahead. He's exactly right, and on the chart of the total catch, Virginia went up just over 1 million pounds in the total catch in 1 year. And that is illustration that there is market improvement by 1 more million. I mean, if we can go up 1 million pounds a year, that's amazing.
And my final point was gonna be, I lost it. Go ahead.
My fault.
Yeah. It's gonna be the topic of the fixed fishing gear and the piers. I don't know, as a commercial captain, when I'm moving up and down the river, I couldn't tell you what the licensed pier looks like from any other pier. Now, James River Pier, I got it. The Buckrow Pier, I got it, But if somebody sticks a $50 license on a pier in the Pagan River, now I'm not commercially fishing, I'm a commercially towing and salvage captain, but I'm gonna miss it, okay? But, so I don't know how you identify those, other than, George, you mentioned about having a list of them, so you could kind of note where they are. I see that as a pretty big, an issue between you and the Marine Police of where these potential $50 fishing piers are. That's kind of a.
More of an issue when we don't know where they are.
Exactly. I don't know what, I look at a pier and say, yeah, it's a pier. I just don't know if they got a $50 fishing license.
Mike, I do want to confirm verbally,
And so
does this
fixed
reflect
fishing
your motion?
devices like your pound nets, we know where they are. I mean, you can see them and you can tell, yeah, that's a pound net. And if there's other fixed fishing devices that are out there, then you likely, because they're fixed, you know where they are. So that's probably less of an issue. So the question is, how far away, for staff, how far away should we be from those fixed fishing devices? And then how you sort out the location of these $50 fishing pier permits.
So an explanation is 3 watermen electric shocking in front of the Leedstown Pier in the Rappahannock got a ticket from the Marine Police for being too close to the pier. And when they had the court date, the Commonwealth Attorney in Westmoreland County and the judge both looked at the regulation and said, this is too ambiguous. It needs to be rewritten, VMRC, and he dropped the charges. And so it needs to be rewritten, but it is controversial in opinions between public pier owners and the commercial guys.
Would it be unreasonable to ask you to put together a list of approved areas for electrofishing?
How do you mean?
Well, we've got the 3 that the men are using now. Approved new areas that are nowhere near fishing gear or nowhere near piers.
I think it will be very difficult to identify areas that are nowhere near piers or other fishing gear,
Would you have a list of
unfortunately.
piers, licensed piers?
We don't have a definition at this point of licensed fishing piers to know where they are. That's something we are gonna have to tackle. We're starting to discuss with law enforcement, and I think this might be a conversation that that law enforcement should weigh in on. I might suggest, if I may, that we take the motion, discuss that, and then come back to the proximity either later this meeting or at a future meeting, depending on our time.
Sounds good.
I'm finding it hard to support the motion, and I'm gonna tell you why. We need to address the problem he's talking about. We're talking about expanding the fishing, and we already got a market problem evidently. We have a conflict problem that needs to be addressed. This isn't something that has to be done tonight. 70-degree water is not gonna come around until next spring sometime at the earliest. I think we really need to try to address things. And, you know, right now, I'm not allowed to kill net within 900 foot of a commercial licensed fishing pier. And it should be the same with that. It should have to be a commercial licensed fishing pier. And a commercial licensed fishing pier has to allow other people to get there. You can't take a private dock and say, hey, I'm gonna pay $100 and some and buy a license, because that entitles everybody to fish without a license. If you're on a licensed fishing pier, you don't have to have a saltwater fishing license. So that part is very easy to take care of. But we still have, you know, I can understand if he's fishing somewhere and somebody comes, puts a fish pound out that wasn't ordinarily there, he would have a problem. But if the fish pound's been there for 5 or 10 years, in his case is 30 years, and I know they move locations, but generally they're in the same general area all the time. You know, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, is basically what I'm seeing on this. And we really, I have no problem with electrical fishing, you know, that's not the problem. The problem is we need to address the controversial part too. And I'm just, you know, I'm not gonna be able to support it for that reason, and it's not something we have to do tonight. This is something we have time to work with. You've only got 3 people electrofishing. It's probably very consequential to those people, and I think they'd be willing to be in a meeting with the other people and work out something. And I think that's really the road forward we need to take, so.
I drop the motion.
I agree with Mr. Bowden there. Same thing. We've got too much conflict of interest, you know, and he said it plain, it's just too much conflict at this point. Leave it status quo now and just work through it maybe with a private work group or something like that, is what I'd like to see.
Well, I have a question. What on here is in conflict with the gentleman with the pound nets? Is it not expanding the licenses? Is that what's conflict? They want more licenses, or they don't want more licensees into this fishery? Is it adding, you don't want any more well, that's what this does, keeps the same number of licenses. You don't want the same number. Well, no, let me get through this. That does exactly what you say you want. It says, keep the same number of licensees, so we're not adding anybody. So you agree with that, right? You don't want the same number, you want more? You don't want any. Well, that's simply not gonna happen.
Yeah.
You know, we have 3 commercial watermen in this business. You can either say, we don't want more, or, you know, you want less. Well, that's not what this,
No, there's room for compromise here. I'm not saying it's gonna happen tonight, but it could, and that's why, let's hold up for a second. I think one thing we're not looking at, and we need to look at it maybe with staff, and not tonight, is a buffer for these gentlemen, okay? What we're trying to do in this group is save marine sport fish and crabs and speckled trout. I don't wanna get into that, but I have a substitute motion, if you're willing to, because I agree with Mr. Sanford, and I agree with.
let me finish what I was gonna say. We talked about working the conflict with the offset between fixed fishing gear and fishing piers to let staff work that. So that's not part of this. And we're talking in this about removing the size restrictions and time of year, which those commercial watermen can figure out when the best time, and let the market decide how much they want to buy. So I don't see a whole lot of conflict with this. Where the issue is what we're going to address later with the offset between fixed fishing gear and the fishing piers, and define what pier qualifies for this, whether it's a commercial licensed fishing pier or some other category that I'm not aware of. That's where the conflict arises with this. keeping it status quo with the number of entrants in this and removing time of year really doesn't affect anybody except them. So I don't know where the conflict is with this, really.
I'm not suggesting that we remove the 3 people that already have licenses in no way. There's areas that we probably have to restrict. And I think, we need to identify those areas. You have some general information about the blue catfish harvest, electroshock, and natural harvest in different areas. That's something that we could see if there's a correlation to it. If there is no correlation, then the problem's something different. But, until we know something, I just can't expand the fishery. And we are expanding. We're not expanding the number of individuals. We're expanding where they can work. And there may be conflict in these particular areas. You live there, I don't. But there may be some other people live there that feel differently. They might have flake nets that they've had there for 20 years or, I just think we're 3 individuals and it's a group here. I don't know how many is there, but it's a handful and I'm sure it's other ones. We got time to work this out and so everybody could be satisfied.
If we could go anywhere.
Or equally disappointed.
No, if we could go anywhere we wanted, where we can already work, like where his pound nets are, it wouldn't be that big of a deal to leave 3 miles on each side of them for his fish, because we would stay closer to home anyway, because the Rappahannock has very low conductivity, and it only works up there. It's the worst river of all 3 of them. So he would see less people if we was to be able to go where we want it than he would right now, where we're locked in, where we have to work.
I agree with you 100%, that if we're moving in areas where there's no conflict, moving to areas with quite a bit less conflict anyway, it's a plus.
Yes, I have.
But it's something we could probably address all at one time.
My question, what about the pot fishermen?
We have to win June. When do you usually start shock in June?
June.
I mean, that's 7 months away. You could have all the information for us the next meeting and we could make an informed decision. I've never done this before, but I moved a table to motion.
There's already a motion on the table.
All right, all in favor of tabling the motion, raise your right hand.
I'll drop it, but all of the discussions are on the areas, and those items there are the low-hanging fruit that are easy to do. And then all you have left is the areas.
But what Ernie's saying is, we don't know what other user conflict you're gonna run into by opening these other areas, and we need to have a more discussion on it with different people in those areas to see if by opening up other areas, all of a sudden it's gonna cause different conflicts. So that's why I do feel, I'll second the motion, we table this for now until we get further information.
Before we vote, should we just take some public comment?
I don't know if there's gonna be any more, but we can try. Yeah, we can ask. Any comment from the public? Yes, sir, with the beard.
Here we go.
Yeah, my name's Christian Moore. I'm a charter captain. I work on the James River, Rappahannock River. I provide trophy catfishing trips for people from all over the U.S. People come from Canada, other countries. I've had people from Europe come over here. I can tell this is a sore subject for everybody sitting up there. I don't want to take too much of your time. I appreciate y'all letting me talk. Virginia put these fish in here in the 70s to create a recreational fishery. Guess what? They succeeded. We get millions of dollars in revenue from people coming to the state to catch these fish from all over. And what he's talking about, his pound nets that he's fishing on the Rappahannock, I know all of you up there, this is your livelihood, some of you fish for a living. It's how you put food on the table for your families. I'm in that boat too. I'm a full-time catfish guide. That's how I put groceries on the table. When this man is talking about nets where he's got them and the shock boats coming through there, I can attest to that. You've got those nets at Carter's Wharf, right? Those are your nets. For the past 5 years, I have caught good fish in that area at that time of year. And it's not like the fish aren't there. I've got $10,000 worth of electronics on my boat. I can tell you how big the fish is, how many of them sitting there. When they run these shock boats, the fish become inactive. They do not feed for days and days. I can spend countless hours on the water patterning fish, burning a pile of gas up. And I'm fishing in these areas, and they see me put fish in the boat, and I have had shock boats. When I pull anchor and leave to go do another set somewhere, these shock boats come and drop their electrodes where I'm fishing. So when I go back there the next day to rely on those fish to put my clients on, they're there. I see them on the graph, but they don't eat. That's all I want to say. I'm just putting that out there, food for thought. He's right. Electrofishing shuts down the bite. The gentleman in the plaid shirt up there, you, sir, what was your name?
Chris Ludford.
Chris, you spoke earlier about the rockfish fishery and the snow melt. We can't control Mother Nature. He relies on conductivity for his electrofishing to work. Why are we investing so much time and energy into something that is relying on Mother Nature for it to be successful? You know what I mean? I'm targeting 3% of the biomass. The fish I'm targeting are 50 pounds and above. That's 3% of the catfish in these rivers. So it's a whole hell of a lot harder for me to catch what I need to catch to sustain my business than it is for him. Unless, and it's making it even harder when they're running these shock boats. And it ain't just the catfishing. This is charter captains for all freshwater species in these rivers. When they shock the waters, it shuts the bite down for all of us. That's all I got to say. Mike, do you want to talk?
Yeah, thanks. My name's Captain Mike Ostrander. I'm from Richmond, Virginia. Been a charter captain for Catfish on the James for almost 25 years now, full-time still. So somebody over here said, what's the goal? Well, I've been involved with this catfish work group through NOAA since 2011, and I saw this whole thing happen. And when it started really getting, legs under it, and one of the goals was for it to be sustainable. And, what that means, I don't know, but I think taking size limits off of these catfish is not sustainable. That's for darn sure, especially for charter captains. Yeah, in the 2022 DWR size distribution study, 4.5% of the population of the catfish they collected were over 25 inches. So you're talking about, 95% of those fish are in that range that you're collecting right now, or you're shooting for those 25 and under. And another thing about that, removing size restrictions, and this is particularly for the electrofishery, is what am I trying to say here? Virginia Department of Health says no fish over 32 inches can be eaten or should be eaten. And they're saying 2 meals a month for fish below 32 inches. So this fish you're talking about, these upper end of the size restrictions, I think you gotta be careful for that. And that's part of the sustainability, is providing fish that are safer to eat. And those, 12, whatever your low end is, up to 25, 27 inches, those are the ones that are most of the biomass, and the ones that are safer for human consumption as well. So I'm all for, removing these fish, but do it sustainably, do it smart, and think of these charter captains that have been working on the river for a long, long time who are after these bigger fish. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nathan Morgan. I'm a student in high school working with my father to catch blue catfish. One thing I would like to say is when I watch electrofishing, what I've seen, what I've heard, and working with my dad, talking to his friends, what they've said about it, it isn't the worst thing, but it isn't the best thing. It's allowed to move between 3 rivers depending on your license. But making them move freely anywhere cannot work, because licenses like a Potomac license can't go and work in Virginia waters, or a Virginia license cannot go and work Potomac waters, because they're owned by different states. So why can someone that works in the James go to the Potomac, which part of it's owned by Maryland?
We said Potomac tributaries, it's Virginia.
That's all.
Thank you.
Anyone else back here?
I'd like to say a little something else about the pier situation. I don't see how you can justify telling somebody that they have to buy a license to say your pier is a licensed pier. People build piers for two reasons: to fish off of and tie their boat up. And up there where they got the tickets at the campground, that campground stays full of people up there in the summertime, the weekend to weekends. And I know most of them because I live right next door to it. And those people fished off the pier over there for 6 and 8 hours a day and could not even get a bite from a catfish because they were shocking right there within 70 feet of the piers. And if the law is so vague, then it's very simple. You make a rule that you don't shock within any piers within so many feet or so many yards. Stay 1,000 yards away from people's piers. Go up to Rappahannock and knock on some doors of landowners and pier owners and ask them what they think about electrofishing. There's none on the upper Rappahannock that approve of it. Nobody. I know everybody on the Westmoreland side, in the Essex side, in the Richmond County side, and there's no landowners up there that's approval of electrofishing.
I'll address that a little bit. I was on the commission for 8 years, and while we were on the commission, there was a big fuss raised by individual owners about aquaculture. Nobody wanted aquaculture within sight of their pill. The General Assembly passed a rule saying that it was allowed, that, cosmetics, aesthetics, whatever you want to call it, wasn't part of anything that could determine not allowing aquaculture. And I'm sure it's basically the same thing. Right now in the state of Virginia, there is a 900-foot law for commercial fishing within a licensed commercial fishing pier. I cannot get on it. There was one on Shintig for a while. I fished there all my life. They put in a commercial pier and licensed it. And then I wasn't supposed to be there anymore, even though I'd been there 30 years before they ever put it. It only lasted a year or two. So, it was no problem. But if you allow everybody, I own a large piece of waterfront. There's people in front of me, it's 1,000 acres of oyster ground in front of me. It doesn't offend me. I'm a waterman. I've been a waterman all my life. My family's been doing it for, in some cases, I guess 10,000 years when they walked across the land bridge. But, you can't allow everybody. If you would come to Shintig, you would see piers every 60 foot apart down Main Street. So you basically, if you put 1,000 yards, the channel's not even 1,000 yards wide, so you'd probably be 500 foot up in the marsh. I think you got a real problem, and I think we need to solve the problem that you have. You got a fishing gear license, and if it's affecting you, we need to do something about it. Like say, I am a large waterfront owner. There's nothing I could do about anybody being in front of me, and I wouldn't try to, even if I could. We need to take that in consideration. If somebody has a licensed fishing pier, like that campground probably has a licensed fishing pier, you can't be within 900 foot of it. If we need to expand that, that's something we can discuss when we're doing things. But you can't do that. I'm sure there's thousands of piers on every river that you fish in. So basically, you'd be outlawing it kind of under the table. That basically what would happen. And these people have spent a lot of money gearing up. They did it with the consent of the commission and more than the consent. The commission really pushed it, and I guess the governor's office is pushing it. But we have time, and we need to address your problem. We need to address the commercial fishing piers. We need to address the fixed fishing thing. He said he had no problem staying away from fish ponds. It's two other people, and they probably, he can't actually speak for them because they're not here tonight, But if we could get everybody here together, we could work something out. Okay, there's another man here. I think you all are willing to work something out, aren't you? So I think that's the best you can hope for. People's really willing to try and see what we can come up with.
Staff have a problem with that? Working with those people?
No, not at all. I mean, if that's the. So we have a motion, we got a motion to table. If what I'm hearing from the group is a consensus around the fact that I believe y'all don't want to make any changes right now to this fishery without addressing some of these issues.
So it sounds like.
That's the way I feel.
Mike?
Hearing most of you saying.
Mike?
So if that's the general feeling of FMAC,
Yes, sir.
How far would he like us to stay away from his gear, realistically? I mean, what would you like to see? A half a mile?
Well, you just said yourself, 3 miles. I mean, the further the better. What you've got to understand is, he was talking about how long gears fit somewhere. 2 of the pound nets that I'm fishing at Carter's Wharf, that y'all continually shock in front of, have been there longer than I've been alive. Those stands have been there for over 100 years. The Olives fished them there before me. And I've fished with the Olives, and I now own the stands. But the fish that y'all are electroshocking 100 yards from them, or 100 feet, or half a mile, is the same fish that swims up and down that reach of the river that I'm trying to catch. And I'm a catfisherman.
I agree with you.
And like what I said earlier, we get rockfish up there late, prices are gone to crap, the crabs don't get up there, sometimes they don't come at all. So I have 2 sons and myself that depend on these catfish for a living. And don't get me wrong, I want to protect the crabs and the other fish also. I'm not opposed to protecting anything, but I'm going to protect my living, my livelihood for my family. We need some space for our gear to work. When you shop down there and you've seen us down there fishing those nets, and you come down the river from Wilmot 15 or 18 miles, and you stop 100 yards of my pound net and start shocking. I've watched you do it this year several times. We need some room for our gear to be able to catch. Everything that you shop around Carter's Wharf is the fish that I'm targeting to catch. And you see the numbers that I read earlier, what kind of effect it had this year, because y'all shocked up there more than you normally do, and you know you did. In 23 and 22, y'all didn't come up there that much, and we had 2 of the best years we've ever had. This year is going to probably be the worst season that we have ever had catfishing.
All right, thank you.
Numbers have bottomed out to nothing.
All right, Pat, can you give us an idea at the next meeting of how far shock carries in the water?
That would be better for George to answer that.
At perfect conditions, it might be 75 yards in a circle. Nowhere near this pound where we actually, the field will actually go.
The problem with that is the fish swim, they're not confined to that 70 yards. I got a picture on my phone of my pound nets and your shot boat in the same picture. Tell me you didn't get close to them.
All right,
You were shocking, I watched you bail the fish up with the dip net.
okay. Gentlemen,
This has been going on for too long. You're destroying somebody else's living for you to try to make a living. You didn't want anything to do with the catfish until electro fishing came along.
Forever, I think.
You didn't have anything to do with one. You didn't want a catfish in your boat.
all right, do we have a motion?
You have a motion.
Last
to
one.
table and
Motion to
second
table.
To table this issue.
All right, to table. All in favor, raise the right hand.
I just question, table till when?
This is to table the motion for the time being and work on it. That'd be a separate motion.
can we keep hands up?
Just recreationally.
All right, thank you. That's
I'd like to make a separate motion now pertaining to the Blue Channel Catfish, that we set up a committee to work out our differences with information that you can provide that's beneficial on landings and stuff from both traditional gear and electrical fishing gear. And I think we could work out a boundary, and I'm gonna be honest, 300 foot is not enough. 3 miles is kind of excessive. I mean, you know, if you got the trap spread out 2 or 3 miles apart, you can take half the river. So I think, you know, we need to be a whole lot more than 300 foot, but 3 miles is just, I could never support 3 miles. So I think that's what we need to do, set up a committee, try to get us all the information you can, try to get the 3 electrical, we got 2 of them here tonight, the 3rd one, and, you know, we can work out something. Everybody's just gotta be reasonable, and we can work out something.
Does this reflect your motion, Ernie?
Okay, Pat.
Just to clarify what Ernie said, do you want a blue catfish committee or a work group?
A work group, I guess would be
Okay.
a better
Okay.
term.
Please don't make another advisory panel for us. It's, we can't handle
With the affected individuals.
So stakeholders would be included, Ernie?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Stakeholders.
With, you know, and this won't be part of the motion, but we want to have this issue taken care of by spring. We don't, you know, we know you got pressing issues right now with straight bass and stuff, but we really do want to try to have this before fishing season starts.
Ernie, the discussion about landings, what is that? What does that mean? Stakeholders discuss landings. I get the proximity issue, that's the elephant in the room, but discuss landings?
Is there,
Impact of landings on different gear type.
yeah, if there's a different way you would like me to word that to better reflect what you want,
Well, you're
let me
gonna,
know.
what did we talk about before? We talked about figuring out if there's a correlation between what's going on with a fixed fishing device and electrofishing in the area. That's what you're talking about, landings?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, you know,
I did,
if you see a big spike in electrical fishing landings and a real downturn in fixed fishing gear, you see some kind of
Well,
correlation.
I think that might help the staff come up with a recommendation for standoff distances, if we can find that correlation with data. That just strengthens the
And it-
discussion.
And it definitely helped with the proximity part.
Right.
Is this better? Discuss landings, differences between gears, and discuss proximity issue?
You know, we can just, when the group meets, it can discuss the stuff that's in this motion. There's other stuff in that motion, the size limit and different things. That all could be discussed at the same time, because you're gonna have the group that's actually affected one way or the other. Some people to the plus, some to the minus. I always feel like a good deal, everybody's disappointed. If somebody's not disappointed, somebody really got a short end of the stick.
How's that? A little simpler. To discuss proximity and other issues?
Sufficiently vague to fill just about any quota here.
Pat wants to speak.
I would say that that's kind of broad, and we will probably we'll probably start working on the issues that we talked about. How big is this group going to be? Because I'm assuming we want at least 2 stakeholders, you know, that aren't on the committee. That's how we usually do these things.
I really think if you get more than 10 or 12 people, it's hard to come to consensus.
I would recommend 8, 6 to 8.
That's what I was thinking, 8.
So when you imply stakeholders, the primary stakeholders are sitting in the back, they'd be part of the working group?
They would have a representation, yes.
Absolutely.
You know, evidently we have some charter boat captains who affect it, so we really need somebody from the Charter Boat Association. We got pineatters, you need pineatters. You got electric fishing people that's affected, so we need them. So I mean, you need a wide range, but a small number.
We'll just say representative group, and we can work
Of stakeholders.
with EWR to make sure that we're correctly getting their stakeholders represented as well.
I did not get you.
We'll work with DWR to make sure that their stakeholders are correctly represented as well. We'll make sure the whole group is a representative piece.
Representatives of all the groups.
Yeah.
And, you know, they can consult, just for example, me, I'm from Chincoteague, even if it's a recreational or commercial, I always talk to the people home, the charter boat captains and different things, get their perspective on things. So that's what they need to do, you know, because you can't have everybody involved, and people should, when you talk to your group of individuals, come up with your ideas. So we have something to start with. You know, you would have your ideas, you would have yours, you would have yours, and it would give you a starting point, which then we'll have the data. So I think you could probably solve this in one meeting, two at the most. I think you could probably do it in one. Because I think people are gonna be willing to compromise and come out with something, because whatever you get, it's gonna be more than you have now. And, you know, in the same way with you, if you get the tributaries, that's a gain for you. So everybody can actually gain a little bit, you're gonna lose a little bit, but if, you know, if it comes out of wash and everybody's satisfied, we've done a good job.
That's right.
I was going to say, we will do our best, but like I said earlier, we are shorthanded with staff right now, but we'll do our best as we always do. Yeah, and it takes 3 months. It used to take us 20 days to do a regulation. Now, because of the new policies, it takes 3 months. So,
Thank you.
Just to make a point, you can't read anywhere in any news article that the invasive species of blue catfish is decimating, or I'll take that word back, impacting almost every other fishery that we have, and the blue catfish numbers are growing and growing. Virginia catch went up 1 million pounds in a year. Potomac catch, by 70 watermen in the upper Potomac are catching 3.4 million pounds a year in just one river, 70 watermen. And the market and the processing will catch up, because it already is. The electric shocking, if you go back to Alexa's chart, is 10 to 12% of Virginia's catch by 3 watermen in 4 months of the year that the water's 70 degrees or more. It is the single most effective way, and I know it impacts the other watermen, that is an absolute granted. But 3 guys, 4 months, 10 to 12%, and if they didn't have the 25 or 26 inch side restriction, that 12% could go up quite a bit. So it is, if our goal is to protect all of our other fisheries and catch as many blue catfish as we can to at least stem the tide surge, electric shocking is important.
I take it we don't have a next meeting date.
In all fairness, I'll speak for Tom Powers, he's not here. He will be raising the roof about catching big channel, blue catfish, because he wants to catch them and stuff, so I'm just being the devil's advocate.
Agreed. It's really,
I think, you know, this is something that we need to, we can address it.
To your question, Jeff, that's sort of getting into our next item. At the very least, I think we could expect to have a meeting in March. With our next item is, ASMFC asked if we were interested in doing the February black sea bass season again. And if we do, then potential reductions to offset the February fishery would come back to the committee, as you usually provide input in March. So at the very least, we would have a meeting then, if nothing else comes up before that.
I didn't see that on the list of items.
We just got the email from ASMFC.
All right. I got a feeling we may need to get together before that for this.
That'll be a work group meeting. We'll figure that out. That'll be separate.
All right.
Yeah, so that's not counting the work group, just, we know if we pursue the February sea bass season, which I believe we intend to, at the very least, the next FMAC meeting would be March. Could be sooner if things need to come up.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
We have,
We had to approve this motion, so I'll call a question on this motion to set up a blue catfish working group. We had a motion and a second, but we didn't vote on it. I know it's a formality, but, you know,
All in favor of the motion, raise your right hand. Any
Right.
opposed?
and then we got public comments for anything that's not on the agenda.
You do have public
Any new
comments for anything
business?
not on the agenda first.
yeah, they're bringing that up now.
I'd like to do one more motion, and that is, I'd like it to be in the minutes that we thank Jeff for all of his years of service. And, and just job well done. And I'd like a second on that.
Seconded.
I'll second it.
All-
Thank you very
Raise your
much.
left hand.
Other hand.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome. Glad you let me help.
Jeff?
And on another sad note, I don't know how many of you all knew Louis Gillingham, evidently he's passed away. He was in charge of the saltwater fishing tournament in later years, but he's been with the commission. I started in 1992, I think. He was already here.
85.
Robert Riley started the month after I was on the Finfish committee, and he's retired, so we're really gonna miss him. He was certainly a gentle soul.
Wealth of knowledge.
Chairman, can you ask if there's any other public comment that was not on the agenda?
Is there any other public comment, something that's not on the agenda? Hi,
Jeff,
sir.
just a reminder about the Spanish mackerel port meeting next Monday in Virginia Beach.
We've got one in Virginia Beach, we've also got one in Whitestone. We got them posted on our Facebook page and on our main page as well.
And there's flyers in the back of the room.
Love to see people come out.
Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it immensely.
And if any of the committee members need travel reimbursement, you could see Catherine over here. Or email me.
I have so much fun, I do it for free.
Hopefully I'll see you before March.
Travel reimbursement is Tylenol.
Just recreational. I used to, I actually run.
Say what goes round, comes around. You got the chairmanship for me, and